Honestly, I don't have a lot of words to describe Toy Story 2. Just one. Brilliant. It's a brilliant film, and as a sequel, I can say it's even better than the original. It evolves the characters, brings in new settings, and doesn't even reuse a lot from the first film, which is what a great sequel should be. Now, don't get me wrong, I love Toy Story 1, it's still a classic, but Toy Story 2 is just a masterpiece. All the returning voice actors do a great job, and the new ones like Joan Cusack as Jessie, Kelsey Grammer as the prospector, and oh man, Wayne Knight as the legendary Al McGuigan are great additions. The animation is pretty top notch too, and even the human characters look a lot better than they did before. And there are so many iconic scenes from this movie that I can name, but I'm pretty sure you all know them. The score is also great, and oh my god, the song When She Loved Me always tugs at my heartstrings every time I listen to it. So yeah, as you can tell, I absolutely adore Toy Story 2. It's definitely my favorite of all the Toy Story movies, one of my favorite Pixar movies, and just one of my favorite movie sequels in general. But just like the first film, Toy Story 2 also had a pretty crazy development. Like you thought the first film's development was nuts, get a load of what happened with this movie. Okay, so originally it was going to be a direct-to-video sequel, like how a lot of Disney sequels were during this time. However, during screenings, Disney decided to upgrade the film for a theatrical release. However, during the transition, there were several rewrites to the story and several characters were changed altogether. Like, did you know that Bullseye was actually going to speak in the movie, or that Jessie was not in the film at all and instead there was this cactus character? However, the craziest thing that happened with this movie is that it was almost completely deleted by accident only a few months before the movie was actually released. Yeah, just completely deleted altogether. Though thankfully they found backups of the film, and after all this craziness, the rewrites, they managed to release the film on time. And it's just incredible that after all this, the movie was still phenomenal and did super well. And just like before, we got a tie-in video game, this time called Toy Story 2 Buzz Lightyear to the Rescue. So like before, Traveler's Tales is our developers, and this time the publisher was the same for the most part on all versions. With the exception of the PC version, which was published by Disney Interactive and went by the title Disney Pixar's action game, Toy Story 2. Again, I'm assuming it goes by this weird name on PC so it doesn't get confused with the other Toy Story games on there. But on consoles, it was published by Activision and it was first released on the PlayStation and Nintendo 64, and later on it was ported to the final Sega console, the Sega Dreamcast. And for this video, I'm going to be taking a look at all three console versions. And once again, for the PS1 version, I will be using the classic version that you can find on the PSN store. But yeah, let's head in and see what Toy Story 2, the video game, has in store. Man, this box art is just wicked awesome. The lighting is cool, Buzz looks like he means serious business, and then we just got Zurg over there just chilling out. So in terms of how it follows the story, it follows it okay, I guess. So if you recall from my Bugs Life review, I said there were a few cutscenes that felt out of place and the dubbing wasn't all that great. Well, Toy Story 2 still has those problems, and it's actually even worse here. So like before, only the Dreamcast, PC, and PS1 versions have the movie clips, and the N64 one is just a slideshow. But again, like I said before, I prefer the N64's slideshow. The CD version's cutscenes play at the most random times, and in the context of the game, a lot of them don't really make any sense. Like for example, they play the scene where the utility belt Buzz and the other toys are climbing up the shaft in the elevator, but when the level elevator hop is shown, you're playing as regular Buzz, and utility Buzz is nowhere to be seen in the actual level. In fact, there's a previous stage where you defeat him, so it doesn't make any sense whatsoever. And the cutscenes just look awful. I know it's CD based, but I don't know, it just looks really messy. Even the Dreamcast version, which is a much more powerful system, the cutscenes still look awful. Heck, the cutscenes they used in A Bug's Life look better than this. And of course, the dubbing. Okay, so in A Bug's Life, it wasn't really noticeable with the dubbing. They hide it pretty well there. But in Toy Story 2, it's so apparent that some of the voices just don't sound right at all. Like here, listen to this scene.
Listen, Flyboy, the contents of that case are worth more than you make in a year. You got that sport?
Listen, Flyboy, the contents of that case are worth more than you make in a year. You got that sport?
Yeah, it's not very good. So overall, yes, the cutscenes in the CD-based versions were a novelty at the time, but nowadays they just come off as pretty annoying, and I'd much prefer the N64 slideshow approach. So graphics-wise, it looks pretty good for 1999. The environments look nice, the models are a little derpy, especially Buzz, but it's still not bad. And oh my god, the music! This soundtrack slaps so hard. I like the previous two games' soundtracks, but I don't know, man. Toy Story 2's soundtrack is just amazing. Though once again, the music is gonna sound different depending on which version you play, so here's a comparison, and I'll let you be the judge of which sounds better. Even if you end up not playing the game, at least give the soundtrack a listen. It's just beautiful. But yeah, presentation-wise, it's pretty good. Not really much else to say about it. And the gameplay, it's so good. Okay, just as a fair warning, be prepared for a ton of praise coming up. Okay, so what we have here is a 3D platformer collectathon, similar to Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie. There are 5 Pizza Planet tokens in every level, and each of them you get through a similar fashion. One you just find in the stage, either with a puzzle or from a big platforming sequence. Another you get 50 coins to ham, another where you have to find 5 objects in a level, and there are also these races/time challenges that give you one as well. And finally, there is one you get from defeating a mini-boss. You actually only need 1 Pizza Planet token in a level, and then you can move on to the next stage. The only time it's gated off is the final boss, where you'll need 40 tokens, but other than that, you can just move on to the next stage. So what can Buzz Lightyear do? Well, he can jump, ground pound, shoot his laser, and spin around. You could also charge your laser for a more powerful shot, and you could even find laser power-ups which just shoot the powerful shot, which is very satisfying to use. You could also charge your spin for a little bit, however I didn't really use this because Buzz gets tired from charging it, which leaves you vulnerable to enemies, so I just kinda stick with the regular spin. Or the laser, of course. Buzz can also find Mr. Potato Head and Rex in a few stages. Rex gives you hints on where the Pizza Planet tokens are, and for Mr. Potato Head in some stages, if you find a piece for him, you can bring it back to him and he'll give you a new power-up you could use. For the most part, these are okay. They're only used for certain missions in the game, and you don't even get some of them until the very end. And there are very few Pizza Planet tokens you cannot get until you get certain power-up in another stage. So if you want to get 100% completion, you're going to have to backtrack, which I'm not really a fan of. I much prefer when I can get everything in a single stage. The only time I think backtracking works if it introduces a new part of the stage, but Toy Story 2 doesn't really do that very much. And even if it does, it's only like a small area. But honestly, it's not that bad of an issue, especially if you're just playing casually and not going for 100%. But the levels themselves, man, these are so much fun to travel through. The first stage especially showcases how good the level design is. You feel so small in Andy's house, and it really takes advantage of you being small. Like the living room, the kitchen, the basement, even the attic. Another stage I really like is Construction Yard, where you gotta platform through this entire construction site, and if you press these switches and accidentally fall, you can use the platform to get back up, and it's just a really fun stage, and the music is super chill. Okay, sure, not all the stages are amazing. Like, I never really cared for Alleys and Gullies. Great music, but it's just kind of a boring stage. And the bosses are pretty much on the same level as A Bug's Life. Pretty easy, but they are slightly better than last time. Though, I mean, the final boss is really lazy. It's literally just 3 mini-bosses you fight at once. But some of them like Zerg are pretty fun, though apparently from what I hear, he's actually unbeatable on the PC version because he'll just keep flying away and it's impossible to hit him. So if you're thinking of getting the PC version, keep that in mind. In fact, let's get into some version differences. So the PS1 version is pretty nice, aside from the dumb FMVs. It's probably my favorite version of the game. The CD quality music, it controls the best I feel, and it's just the version that doesn't really do anything wrong. Though the N64 one isn't all that bad either. Sure, the colors look a little saturated and it doesn't have the CD quality music, but it still plays pretty well. Though again, you do need a controller pack to save. But once again, it's not the end of the world. But let's talk about the Dreamcast version because, oh man, I have a lot to say about this port. So for those who are unaware, the Sega Dreamcast was the very last system Sega had before they went third party. It was a great system, and usually for multi-platform games, the Dreamcast versions were always the best versions by far. This was obviously due to the Dreamcast being the most powerful system at the time, well, until the PS2 came in and just murdered it, but it was more powerful than the N64 and PS1. So you would think that Toy Story 2 on the Dreamcast would be the best version, right? Right?
Wrong!
Oh no, the Dreamcast port is a mess on every level. Firstly, now I know this is a problem with most Dreamcast systems, and I can't really show this, but the disc reader screams like a banshee and it always seems like it's struggling to read the disc, and it kinda terrifies me, honestly. But that's just the first problem. The second problem, the controls are screwed up. So when you move with the analog stick in the N64 and PS1 versions, it's smooth and you can move all around. In the Dreamcast version, you could only move diagonally, which makes controlling Buzz nearly impossible with the analog stick, and using the Dreamcast D-pad to move is not very comfortable. This is because the Dreamcast D-pad was never really ideal for 3D games, and even if you're using the D-pad on the PS1 version, it's still controlled a lot better. Believe it or not, the draw distance is actually even worse on this version. I literally cannot see anything with it. It's so god-awful. And oh, those load times, oh man, they take forever on this version. But the absolute worst part about this port though, is saving. Now in the PS1 and N64 version, once you make a save, you can overwrite the save file, like in every other game ever. But in the Dreamcast version, you can't overwrite a save. If you want to save your game again, you have to make a new save. You cannot overwrite a previous save. So if you've been just saving a lot, your memory card is gonna get filled up. This is just terrible. I cannot believe they screwed up the save system when it was perfectly fine in the other versions. So what I had to do was, I had to save once, then after a few more levels, save, then delete the first save, and then the cycle just continues, and it's just so tedious to do. While the N64 version needed a controller pack, at the very least, saving was not this screwed up. Okay, I will give this version credit that I think it looks the nicest of the three versions, but still, with all these problems it has, this is the worst version of the game. And it's also pretty expensive too. This goes for around $50, $60 to even $70, whereas the PS1 versions you can get for $6 on the PS3 store, and the N64 one is pretty cheap too. I understand that a lot of Dreamcast games are expensive, but still. But yeah, the Dreamcast version is just a mess on every level. It's still playable, and it's still largely the same game, but just play the other versions. They're just so much better than this. There is one more thing I do need to mention, since I find this piece of trivia pretty interesting. So Toy Story 2 actually had a little bit of controversy, and in case you're wondering, no, I'm not referring to the Prospector blooper. I'll keep this brief and I won't dwell on it, but at around Al's penthouse, you'll encounter these shotgun enemies here. Well, the design was seen as offensive, so there was a peaceful protest in front of Activision's headquarters, and following that, they changed the design in future versions of the game to this generic cowboy design. From what I understand, only the American PS1 and the N64 versions have the original design for this enemy. Later versions have the changed design like the Dreamcast version. But yeah, just a little piece of trivia I thought I'd acknowledge about the game. But overall, Toy Story 2 as a game just rocks. This is one of my favorite 3D platformers ever. I go back to it quite often. In fact, after I just got done recording all the footage for this game, I actually did a separate playthrough of the PS1 version on my PSP. That's how fun this game is. The FMVs may be unneeded, the bosses aren't anything special, and like with A Bug's Life, it isn't very long, but there is so much this game offers that any fan of 3D platformers would love. And it's only $6 on the PSN store, so it's really easily accessible nowadays. And hey, if you want to go old school, you could always get the N64 version. It's just a great game, and it's based on such a masterpiece of a film. I highly recommend playing it. There may be technically better games out there, but Toy Story 2, it's just a fun game all around. But yeah, that's all the time we have for today. Next time, we'll be looking at Monsters Inc. for the PS2. I hope you all enjoyed me gushing a lot about this game, and I'll see you all next time. Bye!